This is the IBJ Podcast for the week of April 11th, 2022, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. It's probably fair to say that most folks in the Indianapolis area have been to the city of Lebanon, Indiana, although they probably were passing through at about 70 miles per hour. Interstate 65 runs right through the city on its route between Indianapolis and Lafayette. And at that speed, motorists might not notice many of the improvements, or if you're among the critics, you might just call them changes, prompted by Mayor Matt Gentry. You might recall Gentry was just 26 years old when he was elected mayor in 2015. His platform called for breaking the city out of a certain stasis and encouraging economic development and community growth. His early initiatives included spiffing up downtown and improving its infrastructure in hopes of attracting restaurants, businesses, and residential development. He's focused on bringing more big companies to the mammoth Lebanon Business Park, in particular firms in food processing and manufacturing. He's concentrated on amenities for residents, including recreation plays like a proposed $25 million field house that in turn would anchor a 95-acre development with apartments, condos, restaurants, office buildings, and hotels. And Gentry still faces resistance from residents who would prefer the city retain its small-town character. But Lebanon and its immediate vicinity could be on the verge of massive change. Gentry learned last month that state economic development officials have targeted Boone County as a key location for future growth. They're exploring options to buy large swaths of farmland to make way for a huge business park as large as 7,000 acres for companies in high-tech and other innovative industries. Lebanon, of course, is the county seat, smack in the middle of Boone County. And the city certainly will be a factor that companies consider when they weigh whether to set up shop, needing hundreds, if not thousands, of employees. Mayor Matt Gentry, now 32 years old, is our guest this week. And our conversation continually comes back to the central question of trying to maintain the essential character of Lebanon while making it attractive to new residents and positioning it to grow. I'm pleased to welcome to the podcast Matt Gentry, Mayor of Lebanon, Indiana. Thank you for making time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mason.
I think mayor is the simplest job title we've had on the podcast in several months, but it is probably the most complicated job.
That is a fair statement. Yes. I always love having to go to elementary schools and they ask, what does the mayor do? It's like, well, how much time do you have? So
what do you tell them?
I just try to tell them it's about trying to make your community the best place to live. And that's really what it boils down to. And there's a lot of facets to that, but it's really just trying to make your community a place that people want to grow up and raise their families and one day come back and raise their own. So,
okay. Now, right off the bat, I want to return to a question that we asked you back in 2016, about 9 months after you were first elected mayor. Very early in your career, you said that the state should have a 2-term limit that keeps mayors from serving more than 8 consecutive years in office. Where do you stand on that right now?
Honestly, after being in it for so long, or for almost 2 terms now, in the kind of the deep of it, I'm conflicted now on what I said about that at that time. I do think there are a lot of things. You have to have mayors that are continuing to push forward, right? And so, I think when I said that, I was trying to get the fact that you have a mayor that constantly has new ideas and a drive to keep the community going. Because you don't want a mayor that's just in there hanging around kind of just because they like kissing babies and going to ribbon cuttings, right? If you have a mayor that's pushing things forward and making your community better every day, at the end of the day, I guess leave it up to voters let them make that decision. But, it's hard to legislate that, I'm sure. And, at the end of the day, too, my situation, I feel like I kind of lost 2 years because of COVID. And it's like, I don't feel like I've necessarily gotten the full 2-term impact, if you know what I mean, as well. So that's the challenge I have.
What are your plans for the next election? Do you plan to run again?
I'm still making that decision at this point. I have a 2-year-old and my wife, that's going to be a family decision that we make. Again, as we'll talk about, I'm sure in this podcast, we have several large projects happening here in Lebanon. And I want to make sure that those are in a good point and can keep moving forward. So a decision I'll make down the road here next year.
Yeah, when I posed that question on myself, pretending to be mayor, I suddenly sort of felt a sense of ownership for Lebanon, Indiana.
It's because it's a big commitment. I always say, mayor's different than running for the state legislature or anything else, because you're constantly in your community, right? You're never not the mayor, right, when you're in town. So you're mayor when you're at the grocery store, right? You're mayor when you're at the doctor's office, right? You're mayor at the chiropractor's office, right? So you're always the mayor, right? So it's definitely a different burden than maybe other elected positions. So it's a big decision to make. It's all about trying to have the right team to keep your community moving forward. So.
Yeah, but I would assume, I mean, if you come in with a very sort of definitive vision, which I think you did, that after working on it for 6 or 8 years, and you, as you said, you would be in the middle of a bunch of different projects, and you would hate for somebody new to come in and just decide that wasn't important, or just to go in a different direction.
Right, exactly. And there's, I think there's good times, right, to say, hey, I've done what I came in to do, and I'm ready to be done, and let someone else kind of take the torch and keep things moving forward. But if you're in the middle of projects, that becomes a much harder decision to make, unless you're comfortable that someone that would come behind you is ready to keep, continuing your vision as forward, and they agree with kind of what you're doing as well.
So we reported back in 2016 that at the end of every work day, you mark an X on your calendar as a reminder. Yeah. Yep. That your time could be limited. Did you stop doing that after you were reelected? Do a second term?
No, I didn't. It's a visual reminder for me. I have a certain amount of time to do this. And my goal is to make every day, to do the most possible impact I can make Lebanon better every single day. So it is a visual reminder for me. And, it is kind of that pressure clock that says, this, you don't get days back, right? And you got to keep working, nose to the grindstone, and keep pushing.
Do you have bigger political ambitions? Do you have your eye on another office somewhere down the road?
I get asked that question a lot. People, when I first came into office, just said, well, he's just going to be the mayor to be a stepping stone, jump up to whatever. And, still here 7 years later. So being the mayor is the best job I've ever had. I love it. I'm making an impact in my community where my son's growing up, where hopefully one day he'll come back and raise his family. I love being the mayor, right? And I think we're Lebanon. It's an exciting time to be the mayor for sure. A lot of projects that we have going on. Politics is a weird world. Sometimes opportunities present themselves, but like I said, I love being the mayor, and I want to continue doing that, until I don't, I guess, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So you were not the only really young Indiana mayor to be elected in the aughts. Did you ever hear any comparisons to Pete Buttigieg?
Not so much Pete. Here I'd get more with Mayor McBarnes in Frankfurt, because he was 23 when he was elected. Yeah. I think he had finished his college finals at Butler, and he came right in. So I got compared to Mayor McBarnes a lot. And actually, when he was here, Mayor of Frankfurt, he was a very good mentor and friend to me as well. So we had good conversations. But there's actually kind of a crop of young mayors, around the state. And when you go to conferences and stuff, we all would kind of hang out together and trade ideas and all that stuff. But yeah, there was there's always new ones every year, or it seems like every cycle as well. So
what were you thinking? Why did you want to be mayor?
On bad days, I ask myself that too. My background, I graduated from Purdue with, degrees in political science and economics. And I worked at the State House on staff, worked on political campaigns. I always thought I'd be kind of the guy behind the scenes. And I was looking for someone to run for mayor of Lebanon. Again, I've lived here in the Lebanon area since 2007. And, I wanted to raise my family here. I wanted that small town feel. And I was looking for someone that would help take Lebanon to the next level. And I couldn't find anybody that was willing to do it. So I said, well, if I believe in this, I guess I'll put my name on the ballot and see if people give me a shot at it. Talk about what I feel like our community needs. And they were willing to give me a chance. And they gave a 25-year-old kid their support in the primary, and then again in the general election. And it's just been a lot of projects and a lot of effort and a lot of just hard work kind of every day ever since then.
How would you describe Lebanon when you took office?
I think Lebanon was at a turning point. We were at a critical junction in our history. Obviously with Boone County growing as fast as it is, one of the fastest growing counties in, for sure in Indiana, and if not the entire nation. Seeing that kind of suburbanization pressure happening, kind of coming our way, we I felt like a few critical years to try to determine what who do we want to be, right? What do we want to be going forward? And what's the vision for 2020 and beyond, right? And so that's kind of what I spent my first term kind of working on, to set the foundation of kind of a strong foundation for us to grow upon, and how to manage growth pressures and changes in the economy, and then how do we kind of put that all into a place that makes Lebanon the best place to live and raise a family. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's my goal. Is I want Lebanon to be the best place to do business, to live, to work and play, right? Lofty goal for sure. And we're doing a lot of things I think are making it better here, but that's the ambition, and it's the work's never going to be done with that.
I think as you sort of alluded to, Lebanon definitely was a place that had not changed much,
right? Yep.
In the previous decades. Obviously, if the populace voted for a 25-year-old, they were looking for some kind of change and some kind of fresh perspective. What was the vision? What was the elevator pitch that you were giving them? I'm sure it wasn't just like, well, we'll see what works.
Yeah, no, it was, how do we capitalize on, one, Lebanon's location, obviously between Indianapolis and Lafayette, with Interstate 65. How do we capitalize on that location to bring higher paying jobs, to bring more amenities, more options, smart, sustainable growth, but also keep kind of that small town charm and feel, right? So kind of balancing all of those spinning plates at the same time, essentially. And not just trying to say, I remember how Lebanon was when I was growing up here in the 1960s, and let's keep it like that, because I think, the only thing that's consistent ever is change, right? So it's a matter about how do you manage that change and make it positive, right? And not leave anyone behind, and make a community that's available for people of all walks of life and outlooks. So that's something that I think we've tried to focus on. And, we're not trying to just be all, attract only, high-end development and, high expensive homes. We're trying to have a base where we have, workforce housing, where we have, first-time home buyer housing, where we have downtown apartments, where we have kind of a good mix of everything that, anybody could find something that they would like to both live and, and also work here in Lebanon, right? And have that kind of mixture of industry, but then also residential and development as well.
Now, before we started recording the podcast, you showed me a bucket.
Yeah.
That's in the background in your office. Now, tell everybody, what does that bucket say?
Yeah. So I kind of it's a kind of a giant square jar, essentially. When I first came into office, I heard, well, that's how we've always done it, a lot. And I got so tired of that. I essentially said, I'm putting a swear jar that if you say, well, that's how it's always been done. In my office, you have to pay a quarter, essentially. So luckily, I don't hear it very often anymore now. We've kind of broken that habit from people. But that was a big kind of a culture change that I kind of faced when I came in, that, we've done certain things, certain ways. And, if there's a reason behind it, that's valid. So, but explain that to me. Don't just say, well, because we've always done it that way. Because I think you always have to be constantly looking at, is this the best way to approach a solution, or best way to approach a problem, and find creative solutions to solve that problem.
And at the same time, I'm sure that there was a fairly large segment of the community that just really didn't want things to change at all.
Still is. I'm aware I'm kind of one of those people, you either love me or you hate me, and for people that, maybe remember how Lebanon was, and they want Lebanon to be away from Indianapolis and not be connected to that. I'm probably not their favorite person, and I recognize that, but I feel like it's better to try to be proactive and control our destiny versus, trying to bury our head in the sand and then be overwhelmed by it because you can't, you haven't laid the groundwork to prepare for it. So that's something that I think is a different approach, because I feel like there are, Lebanon's a special place, and just like they do, but I don't think you keep it special by putting under a glass bottle. You keep it special by the themes that we have and what we focus on, the community that we've built here. You want to accentuate those and make sure that continues and grows throughout the community. not just assuming that it won't change by allowing, not allowing any new people to come in, right?
So do people come up to you in the supermarket and say, Mayor Gentry, what the hell are you doing? Why are you changing this thing that I love? Whatever that is.
Well, it's not as much a supermarket these days. It's more on social media. That's unfortunate. But yeah, it is, right. It's he just wants to make Lebanon Carmel, or he wants to make Lebanon Zionsville, or insert whatever community you have a negative perception of. But I really don't. I want to make Lebanon the best version of Lebanon. Are there themes that we borrow from other communities? Like Franklin, like Crawfordsville, like Valparaiso. Yeah, there's no rule against plagiarism in community development, right? We can steal good ideas from other communities. Model, take it and make it fit the community that you want to implement it in. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel on these things, right? There's a lot of good community leaders. They're doing a lot of great work. And there's ways to kind of model that and take the best pieces of that and make that fit your community. And that's really my goal. My goal is, again, just to make Lebanon the best place it can be.
So a lot of communities, I think, have approached, Fishers, Brownsburg, Indianapolis back in the day. One of the first things that they tried to do is to kind of reinvigorate their downtowns. And you very early on, I think, proposed spending, $10 million or so, maybe more than that, to improve the central infrastructure of the downtown, like building a public plaza on the county courthouse square, a 200-space parking garage, extending, I think, one of the prominent trails into the downtown area. Was there resistance to that?
Absolutely. They remember, they would talk about how downtown used to be all the shops and all of it, how it was back before Walmart. And I said, that there's a way we get back to that, right? And we have to make the downtown the place to be, right? When I came in, the last major investment downtown had been like 30 years ago. So before I was even born. And we had to, do something, right? Because there were vacancies, right? At 4 o'clock after the county courthouse, workers went home, the sidewalks rolled up, there's nothing to do. So how do we activate that space? And, I believe, places like Carmel and Brownsburg, they had to manufacture artificial downtowns, right? They didn't have a downtown. We had one, right? We're a county courthouse community. We have a beautiful courthouse with buildings all around it. We had the downtown there. It just needed a facelift. It needed to be kind of brought back to life. And, with the project down there of essentially replacing everything from building wall to courthouse wall, we've brought it back. And you go down there at 5 o'clock now, and there are people in the restaurants and shops, and it's the place to be again. And that's something that we hadn't had for a long time. And people were, well, why do we have bump outs, and why do we have all this pedestrian design features that they don't like, right? It's like, that's because we want to make it a place where people want to spend time with their family and friends, and they feel safe to walk around. They feel safe to cross the street, because before we had 15-foot wide lanes, wider than on 65, that people could drive as fast as they wanted through downtown. We want to make them have to think about it and slow down and drive and be aware of pedestrians, because there is, that's our highest density pedestrian area in our community. And we want to make people spend time down there. So there's still resistance to it. It's not like it's been done and people are like, oh, it's perfect. I'm sorry I was wrong. I don't really ever hear people admit me wrong about it. But you look at all the restaurants that are busy, you look at the investments that are happening in the buildings. I think good indicators are tell me it was the right decision to make.
Yeah. I know some commercial developers have proposed mixed use projects that would combine apartments and offices, retail, which I'm sure is something that you definitely want to see. The pandemic delayed those plans. Where is downtown right now?
So on the Brakeman building, that's kind of the one on the western side of State Road 39, just south of our downtown. It's kind of our first mixed-use building in probably more than 100 years here in Lebanon. It's actually going through the demolition process now. So one of the buildings has been taken down, and they're working through. Fortunately, the weather's not cooperating this week, but they're working through that process. It's all been approved, so the financing is secured. So hopefully they'll be able to start construction here this summer, and that'll be completed probably either next year with that. So that's the beginning of kind of that larger vision of bringing that downtown density, downtown activity back to downtown Lebanon.
Okay, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 625 attorneys across 11 offices, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast and our conversation with Lebanon Mayor Matt Gentry. You also decided pretty early Lebanon could be a hub for food processing and food manufacturing companies. Why that focus?
I would say that goes back to kind of my experience, kind of going in by being in college and seeing the impact that the Great Recession had on communities. I was looking around of, what's a long-term sustainable infrastructure or industry that we want to focus on, and even during a pandemic or during a, housing crisis, people have to eat, right? And that's why I feel like the food manufacturing space for us, obviously Indiana is a state that creates a lot of food for us, for the whole nation, right? And so how could we have kind of a piece of that here in Lebanon? So food manufacturing and then also consumer products as well, right? Those are kind of two things, kind of a manufacturing basis. But then they also tend to pay higher wages as well, because that was something that we wanted to kind of diverge from as well. Kind of the bread and butter of our business park for a long time was logistics companies. And that's fine, but they typically don't pay types of wages you want to see to support a family, right? Generally, when I first came in, they were, anywhere from $12 to $15 an hour, which, now the McDonald's is paying more than that based on our unemployment. But we wanted to have industries that would kind of raise the bar from a wages standpoint. And, this food manufacturing, they're paying mid-20s, right? So $23 to $27 an hour, which it may not sound like a whole lot, but it can make a big difference for a family going from $15 an hour to $25 an hour.
And then how did that focus play out? And who have you been able to attract?
So I would say the kind of the poster child for that here under my administration was Ken's Foods. They make all of the salad dressings, and they actually make a lot of the Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce here in Lebanon. And they've been a great employer, great company, potentially talking about expanding already again. But then we've also had some food, some cold storage as well, that kind of dovetails with that, between U.S. cold storage expanding as well as New Cold, which is a very large highly automated cold storage facility, about $150 million investment in Lebanon. But then also companies like Monosol, which, they make the water soluble film for Tide Pods or Cascade Pods that we use in our dishwashers and washing machines, and they've been phenomenal, right? So really kind of diversifying that types of employers and what they do and what they make, products that people can touch and use every single day versus just the companies that kind of move products around, I think is a long-term sustainable types of industries we want to continue to see here.
Now, as we say about Indiana, Lebanon doesn't have any mountains or beaches.
Exactly right.
It does have Interstate 65, which runs right through the city on its way between Indianapolis and Lafayette, and then another 150 miles to the north, Chicago. This might be obvious to everybody but me, but how is I-65 central to the success of Lebanon?
I would say without Interstate 65, we wouldn't have our business park here. And that business park probably equates to about 45 to 48% of our city's tax base. So if we didn't have that, our property taxes would be much higher. Obviously it's a huge employment sector for us. Vast majority of our largest employers are out there in the business park. It's critical for us. 65 is, it comes with challenges too, right? If there's a crash on 65, which happens frequently, if anybody drives that stretch, we get a lot of cars through town, right? And we have to manage that, right? So, there's a blessing and a curse sometimes. But of course, that's the visibility that Lebanon has, right? And that's why, as we kind of talk about how do we, grow long-term, it's kind of why we've been talking about this field house concept there along 65, kind of capture some tourism dollars, show people that there's, more in Lebanon than just, jobs and, and a Starbucks and McDonald's that people usually stop at.
So the Lebanon Business Park is a monster. It's 1,250 acres.
Yeah.
Adjacent to I-65. And tell me if I'm wrong here, this is kind of the southwest side of town.
Yeah.
on the other side of the highway. There are more than 20 companies there. And some are, as you say, manufacturing, light industrial. My understanding is that it's almost full.
It is, yep.
So that sounds like it could be a problem. Where do you put new companies who want to be in Lebanon?
That's something that we've been wrestling with. And, I'd say there's about 2 or 3 more sites in there. Now there are more sites in that, but they're owned by the companies that are kind of adjacent to it that they're ready to, if they want to expand, they kind of have that ready to go. So yeah, there's a ceiling there, right? There's a way to kind of naturally continue to grow that west along State Road 32. But then, there's also been some recent discussions as well with the state kind of pursuing some options of, bringing in kind of high tech research and technology kind of companies. That kind of changes maybe some of the focus of what we have there as well too. So it kind of dovetails into kind of what, the state has kind of seen us as a viable option for some investment. And we're trying to figure out a way to be partners there as well. So, but, we also have a development south of town, the Waterford development, which would include a industrial component as well. So there could be some additional footprint south for users going forward.
Gotcha. So yeah, let me talk about what the state has planned, and to the extent that I understand it.
Yep.
So we reported last week that the Indiana's Economic Development Agency, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, has identified Boone County as a key location for future growth and is exploring land purchase options for what would be a huge, bigger than the entire campus of Purdue University, 4,000 to 7,000 acre business park for innovative high-tech companies. Apparently it's making offers to buy land for a project of this size. It insists it does not have any confirmed details about the size of this and investment that would be required for it, specific businesses that would invest in this project. What is your understanding basically of this and how it would work? What are they trying to do and why?
Yeah, my understanding, and this is based on conversations with both the governor and Secretary of Commerce, they essentially want a ready-made area to compete on a national level for these new types of next-gen technology companies to locate here in Indiana. And they see, they look at where Lebanon is on the map, halfway between Indianapolis and Lafayette, again, along I-65, as we talked about, close to the Indianapolis International Airport. They see a lot of pluses of, and then obviously we have farmland available around us. And so they want to kind of want to master plan this area. It essentially says when they see a large, next gen type technology or research user, they can kind of fast track this and say, hey, we've got this area ready to go. We've done all the planning. We've got all the infrastructure in place. Your speed to business is going to be next to none. And really develop into kind of a research triangle park, kind of North Carolina. So it's kind of the Hoosier version of that, if you want to say. So that's, I think that's something that it's a pretty big swing by the state for sure. But as economic development has changed a lot in the last, even 10 years, how do we kind of set the stage and set the groundwork in place to be able to move quickly when these companies are ready to make these big investments and decisions, and make sure we're competitive. Mm-hmm. Workforce is critical, and being able to be close to Purdue to have serve, students with engineering degrees or research degrees graduating every year, that becomes a very quick, easy talent pipeline for companies that are located there as well.
How much of this would be in Lebanon or really close to Lebanon?
So all of the land, from my understanding, is almost directly adjacent to city land, city corporate limits. So none of it's currently within the city limits. So that's kind of a process we'll have to work through of whether it's in the county, whether it's in the city. Some of it's going to depend on annexations, things like that. My policy is we only do 100% voluntary annexations to the city. So if that's something that they want it in the city, then the landowners have to petition us to come bring it in the city. We'll have to figure out the utilities and how to serve it, how it's served by the road network. Those are all big questions that still have to be answered. This is still very early in this process, but it has a huge potential upside to bring these, next generation careers that pay great wages for families and provide lots of, unlimited potential and opportunities for this current generation and future ones.
And what kinds of companies, do they foresee?
I'd say everything from, biopharmaceutical companies, life sciences, semiconductors, microprocessors, maybe electric batteries. I mean, all of the companies are going to be critical for the next generation technology and products we'll use on a daily basis going forward, right? What do we need to power our society 20 years from now, right? What are the things we need? And they want to be built here in Indiana and hopefully here in Lebanon.
When did the state kind of bring you into the loop on this?
So I officially got briefed by the state March 1st. That was, kind of when I was able to meet with the governor and the secretary of commerce. We tried to set up meetings earlier and they kept getting delayed for COVID reasons and things like that. So I finally got kind of hey, here's the vision for this on March 1st. So now we've been hearing rumors since before Thanksgiving. So we kind of heard lots of things swirling with everything from a penitentiary to a FedEx airport to a nuclear reactor. I started a rumor that they're going to move IMS up to Lebanon. I know, I'm just joking. But lots of rumors swirling, right? But no one knew what was, who was behind this, what they were doing, right? So a lot of kind of uncertainty happening. And so we were just trying, so I was appreciated the state kind of looping us in on that finally. And, it's been, about a month now, and we're kind of still working through the details and, figuring out the right process to go through and how do we balance the property rights of the people wanting to sell the land with the potential adjacent neighbors to it, right? And what's the best process to go through that?
Yeah. So what do they say, Matt? Here's what we need you to do.
There hasn't been an ask yet. We've been having discussions, and it's they're going to need utilities for sure, right? Which that's something that the city obviously has, and we own our municipal utilities that we can extend out there to help serve. But also we don't have unlimited water either, right? So that's a challenge we have is, where do we get water from to serve these? Because a lot of these users are very heavy water users. And so there's been discussions of, what do we do to the interchange at 300? What do they do from a water supply standpoint? So those are all things that have to be worked through and developed to kind of set this stage to make it an attractive place to locate your next gen technology company.
Right. So I guess as you would expect, there's been some pushback from residents of Boone County about how a large development like this could destroy the character of the area. Yeah. What are you hearing from residents of Lebanon?
So I would say, generally speaking, it's from my observation, it really does break along kind of a rural urban kind of divide here. The people that are in town, they see the potential jobs, they see what the opportunities this could provide for their kids and grandkids. They see good things with this, right? Obviously, if you live outside city limits and you maybe own land near this, you get nervous, right? You're like, well, I'm used to looking out over this cornfield, and then that may become a battery plant one day, right? They get nervous about it. So I understand that, but how do you balance that between the landowner that wants to sell the land has that right to do that? Right. So how do you plan for that, and how do you have a process that you can work through? But I'd say generally speaking, from a city standpoint, we see these are types of careers and jobs you want in your community, right? These would be Fortune 100 companies that would be located here that we want to see, that would bring, more dollars into our community, help us bring in more restaurants, more shops, more dining, more options, more things that people want in a community, more amenities, right? So yeah, again, that's kind of the tipping point. That's that balancing thing where we're going through, right? We're changing from a, call it ex-urban rural community to very much a suburban part of the Indianapolis metropolitan area community.
Is it possible to change somebody's mind on something like this?
Oh, I hope so. I'm optimistic. I try. I've tried to be very proactive to engage with people and try to answer their questions if they have concerns about it, and try to understand and try to explain the process, and try to explain, there are going to be any annexations that aren't 100% voluntary, right? So if you don't want to be in the city, you're not going to be forced to be in the city. We can't force you to do things. So, I'm trying to explain, the limitations that we have as a city, what we can and can't do. But, at the same time too, though, sometimes, when you have NIMBY fights, there really isn't anything you can do sometimes to convince people. And, but at the end of the day, I have to look at it from what's in the best interest of the city and my residents, and is it the right decision for the future of our community? And after seeing all of what they plan to do and the investment they want to make and the types of companies and careers that they would bring here, it's hard for me to see any negatives, especially when it's a voluntary process where the people that own the land are the ones choosing to sell it, right? They're not being eminent domain, they're not being forced to do it.
Yeah, it's really going to be up to the negotiations with the state, I would assume.
Yep, exactly.
But not that they can make it worth their while. Yeah, I'm reminded of, and I can't remember exactly where this has been taking place. It's somewhere in central Indiana, where there are some major alternative energy projects that are at least have been proposed.
It was actually Boone County as well.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, you know already more than I do. Where from my perspective, I think there can't be much wrong with having a solar array across the road from you. But some people, find that just to be a complete deal breaker and will try to fight you tooth and nail.
Right. Well, I will say though, I think there's a big difference though between a next gen technology and research park and a solar farm, right? Yeah, you'll have some jobs created with a solar farm, but it's not the same type of scale, right? It's not the same type of careers and opportunities that having a, pick a name of a company that we all know, right? That we may have one of their products in our pocket right now. Having one of those companies located to your community is very different than having a huge array of solar panels, right? So I think the ripple effects and impacts that having those companies that are actually making things, that are researching things, that are developing things is very different than just hey, we're going to turn this farmland into a bunch of solar panels, right? So it's a little bit of a, but yeah, it's kind of that similar though. There is definitely a not in my backyard kind of thread there for sure. But the potential impact and ripple effects, I think, are far greater from this type of development than just a general solar array.
So we go back kind of to the beginning of the conversation for your raison d'etre as mayor.
Yep.
It seems like your biggest challenge is to make Lebanon as attractive a community as possible, so that companies would feel comfortable basing their employees here, and that more people would move here and be a part of the labor supply for the companies. And of course, we know, we've been talking for years now about, how difficult it is to get people to, staff some of these big companies.
Right. Again, I mentioned earlier, we have a 0.2% unemployment rate in Boone County. Less than 300 people are unemployed in Boone County at this moment.
I'm sorry, I missed the percentage. You said 2.2?
0.2% unemployment rate. Right. So very few people don't have a job right now in Boone County. So our challenge is to bring more people to Lebanon, and the way economic development has changed before, previous generations, they would pick, or they would get a job at a company, right, and then they would go move there. What we're seeing now is people are picking where they want to live, broadly speaking, and then finding a job, right? So it's kind of turned on its head a little bit. That's why you hear communities talking about quality of life improvements all the time. That's why a big part of my job is focusing on, building the Big Four trail all the way through Boone County, adding amenities to our parks, why we're building a mountain bike park on an old landfill, why we're doing all of these quality of life amenities to make Lebanon a great place to live, because, we want to convince people to live here, which then helps us attract, high paying, high skilled companies, because we have a great talented workforce available here in Lebanon.
Yeah. So, is there like a U.S. Census website that you can go to every day and see, 2 people moved in?
No, I wish there was, but no, not like that. I don't even know if I've gotten the fully final numbers from the 2020 census yet, even still. But we're probably about 17,000 people now. We've seen, if you compare, I think in 2015 to the year I was running for mayor, we had 2 new housing permits the entire year of 2015. We do that in a day most times now. So it's
when you say housing permit, you mean like for a single family house?
For a single family house. There were 2 new houses built in 2015 in Lebanon.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were not really growing at all, right? We were pretty stagnant, right? So, and now we have home builders focusing on Lebanon. We're growing. Homes are being built. Honestly, you go look on Zillow, there aren't any homes available. So there's huge pent-up demand for housing, in Lebanon, but in all of central Indiana right now. And so we're trying to find, how do we find that balance to provide different housing at different levels, again, to provide different opportunities for everyone.
How are you on permits right now?
I think last I checked, we were over 60 this year.
For 2022 so far?
Yes.
Oh, pretty good. Okay.
Yeah.
I know there's a large, I think 95-acre project that has been proposed that would multifaceted. You would have a 270,000 square foot field house / athletic facility, but there also would be apartments and condos and then commercial space for retail, restaurants, office buildings and hotels. Where do you stand on that project right now?
Yeah, so this is for any of your maybe older listeners. They may remember an old holodome there along 65 in Lebanon. And long story short, Great Recession, whatever. The city gets abandoned. The city acquires that property and demolishes it. Right. So we kind of have this key parcel there at 65 and 39. And so we were trying to figure out, what do we do with that parcel? It's a key area, right? It kind of unlocks kind of that directly southern area of our community. And as we were looking around of, when I first came in, people wanted to do kind of more of an outlet, retail options. But, as we see, outlet and retail has definitely changed in the last 5 years even. We kind of settled on kind of this youth sports kind of concept. We already get overflow from Grand Park now. And so we feel like that's kind of a niche we can kind of continue to capitalize on, again, based on our location, makes it very easy for us to get to. And so we were able to kind of form this partnership with Carden Associates, and they're a proven operator with 3 other facilities. And we think it makes a lot of sense. So it'll be a 9-court facility with 2 full-size indoor football fields. We project to see close to 60,000 people a month visit this. And then the associated restaurants and hotels and entertainment all around it. So it's kind of our play, kind of going back to kind of the history of the site and make it kind of almost a tourism play for us. And again, but also a quality of life amenity, because during the week, it's a public facility open to the public that you can play basketball and pickleball and everything they want to do in there.
So is this a good to go, green lit, all the approvals?
Not quite yet. We just completed the rezoning of that. So we're moving through now we're going to start kind of going to the financial side of that and start moving the financials forward. Essentially, we're targeting a summer groundbreaking for this project. Yeah. So close, but not, definitely not pie in the sky. I mean, it's moving along and it's on the process.
As mayor, how do you measure whether or not you're doing a good job? Do you have metrics? Are you a data guy?
I do. I gauge a lot of it based, honestly, not based on metrics, but it's based on social media interactions. I mean, I can usually get a pretty good sense of what people are mad about, based on Facebook and our different chatter groups we have. But I would say it's kind of a black arts a little bit. It's kind of a you want to see the bigger picture, but then you also understand there's going to be a contingent that may not be for something, no matter what you say or do about it, right? So it's kind of how do you balance by being both a trustee and a delegate, right? How do you kind of balance that internal conflict as a mayor, and be able to see the bigger vision, the bigger picture, and say, hey, I know you may hate what I'm doing today, but there's reasons down the road of why we have to do this now, right? I think people were very confused. Why are we bringing the Big 4 trail to our downtown, right? Why does this trail matter? It's like, well, we can get this trail completed through Boone County. What that does for our local economy and just making it an attraction point, makes it much larger than just if it's just a trail out to Thorntown. So there are things like that there aren't, and I don't expect people to know this, right? But there are things you see as a mayor that you have to be able to see the bigger picture. That there may be kind of rocky water in the short term, but in the long term, it's the right decision going forward.
Has there been something that you've proposed or really wanted to do where the populace or other officials in the county or the city just drew the line and said, no, we're not going to do that?
Yeah, not really, because I'm by nature a consensus builder, right? So I try to find things that people in theory agree upon, right? And then try to move those forward. And, I feel, based on discussions and engagements I have with my council, I get a pretty good feeling whether they're for something or not pretty quickly. And if they're not, if I really believe in it, I may try to kind of convince them and go back and forth with them. But if they aren't budging, all right, we'll move on. Let's find something we agree on and move that forward. I really do try to have I'd rather have us all kind of walk together versus, me kind of going out on a limb. The difference between a leader and a guy just taking a walk is followers, right? So you got to make sure you've got people all walking in the same direction.
When you look back now in your first year as mayor, Is there something that you wish you had known?
I would say I wish I had known it's going to take a long time. Obviously I was 26, ready to go. Just the sheer bureaucracy you have to fight through at the local level, the county level, the state level. It's just a constant fight, right? And so I maybe should have had different expectations of how long things take to do. I said, my campaign in 2015 was about our Lebanon 2020 vision plan, right? We didn't hit everything in there, right? Because there's a lot of complicated things in there. Like I wanted to try to bring additional higher education opportunities to Lebanon. That's not something that's an easy thing to do, right? You got to have a lot of players you have to kind of put together to make that happen. So, but I would say I think I've done I'm happy with what we've done. I think we've done the right things for the right reasons. And at the end of the day, too, I'm comfortable with the fact that if people don't vote for me again because they disagree with me, I can sleep at night saying, hey, I did what I felt like was in the best interest of our community, and I'm happy with that. So I can live with that.
Well, I know we're going to be checking in with you off and on about what the state has planned and also what you guys have planned. So
feel free anytime. More than happy to.
Yeah, consider this a continuing conversation. We'll check in sometime real soon.
Thank you so much.
My thanks again to Matt Gentry. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are a few stories in the latest print edition of IBJ I want to draw to your attention. First up, compared to other major cities, Indianapolis is notoriously low on public green space and the funds to add more parkland. Leslie Bonija-Muniz reports that local officials and not-for-profits now are exploring the potential sale of carbon credits to finance green space acquisition and preservation. Also in this week's issue, Emily Ketterer profiles the 5 Democrats who are running for a newly drawn seat in the Indiana Senate that runs through the heart of downtown Indianapolis. And Daniel Bradley reports that Hamilton County is finally ready to begin its $29 million reconstruction of the heavily traveled intersection at 146th Street and Allisonville Road. And you will not be surprised to learn that it soon will join the county's immense roster of roundabouts, with all traffic lights eliminated. Again, you can read these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or online at IBJ.com. I will say it's quite a bit easier to access all of the latest local news about business and politics and all of IBJ's data on Central Indiana's business, community, and economy if you're a subscriber. It works out to about $2 per week for actionable information you're not going to find anywhere else. Just go to IBJ.com and click on the subscribe button. And thanks again for making time this week for the IBJ Podcast, which is edited by Leslie Weidenbender. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.